United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will be having a moment of silence both at the work session and the regular meeting this week. Tonight, we'd like to join the board in a moment of silence for Baylor Rabel, student athlete from Siegel High School. From what I know at this point, his condition continues to be unchanged. So if you'll join the board in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. I continue to be encouraged with the number of prayers and well wishes throughout the mid-state and across the state. I've heard from board members from one end of Tennessee to the other concerned about his condition. So we'll continue to keep him and ask everyone else to keep him in their prayers. So questions on the agenda?
There's those safety straps that we talked about, we asked about earlier, or bid. You notice the first one there.
Yes, sir. Okay, and the consent agenda. Any questions?
On this Becky Thompson contract, it says that we're paying her $50 an hour while she's traveling, and then it also says 47 cents a mile. She getting both of them?
Find out for us, Mr. Zago, if you will. Find out, and then we'll know before Thursday night.
And it also says on there for part of a day. She only's here for a part of a day. So I don't know whether that means she...
I think, and I'll check and make sure I'm telling you correctly, but I think we're talking about two different travelers. She's going between some schools and getting paid a certain amount there, and then traveling from her home state to us to work with us. But I'll check and make sure.
Well, she's going to get $50 either way she goes because she's coming from Tullahoma. Right? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Estes. Anybody else? Okay, number 7.
7, some recognition. Of course, the Blue Ribbon School Award from Buchanan. The Oakland High School FFA, state winner land judging. That's good. I did get to see them at the Soil Conservation Award ceremony last Friday night. And then Mr. Evans is going to recognize Richard Siegel Foundation support, the running tracks, the things that they've done for us. So should be a good evening of that.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Odom, I hear that you're going to have a big ham Thanksgiving after that event?
I did win that prize. Yeah, and won a drawing.
Tell you.
Okay. Well, invitations are in the mail.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
I was told to give you a hard time about that.
It's fine.
Okay. Number 8.
And that our spotlight on education will be Evelyn Bauer, which will be school psychology. It's I think School Psychology Month or something like that. So they'll do a short presentation for us.
And number 9, you and I have heard. I'm really
Shortened version she's going to do
Okay.
for them, much shorter.
I'm really looking forward to the board and the TV audience to have an opportunity to hear this presentation because it's very enlightening and she is so very energetic and committed to education and partnering with us. So
And she's a parent of children in our schools. You're going to learn something about employment in Rutherford County. What the jobs are, what's the future forecasts for those jobs, what are they paying, that sort of thing. I just thought it'd be really interesting to you. Because as you look at your CTE things, which is not a part of this, but she is over labor and workforce development, one of the things that we try to look at when we develop CTE courses is that alignment, where kids can get a job when they get out. So that's one of the things that we do.
Well, Mr. Latour and the Chamber have just been very proactive, not only in bringing business to this county, but also putting a spotlight on education and wanting to partner with us at every opportunity to help us in every way they can too.
It's a great sales pitch for the Chamber of Commerce when you can say you've got two school systems that are doing well. Because when businesses are looking to relocate, one of the things they look at is what kind of schools do you have? Not only the workforce, because they know their workforce got to live here, and some of their management and people. So they've told us that more than once. You know, they appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
We do.
Number 10.
Number 10, the CTE Textbook Adoption Committee. The Instruction Department recommends the following members to our local career and technical education textbook adoption committees, TCA 49-6-2207, and this was the one that was passed last year, legislature. All members appointed on each committee has completed a record of names and qualification form as required by state policy. This form remains in the office of the local director of schools for 6 years of the adoption. It is the documentation that the board approves the textbook selecting committee and that all are qualified to serve. The textbooks that are being adopted are under in the middle column, the CTE cluster there. There may be 2-3 courses or something underneath that, but that is your clusters that the books are being adopted for.
Appreciate Ms. Duffield serving on that committee. She certainly qualifies as an expert.
And the approval will be the motion to approve that list of members. Of course.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a question about textbook adoptions, not particularly this one. I can hold it until we get to the end if you'd like.
No, sir. I think it's appropriate at this point.
Well, I have a question about textbooks in general. If we adopt, at some point, I guess Mr. Zago, he can handle anything, he can handle this one easily, I'm sure. If we adopt, at some point we'll adopt English. Let's go with English since we're a year or two away from English, I'm sure. And we will adopt a textbook for every level and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars doing that.
Million.
Okay, like I said, millions to do that. Those and I know we have to approve, we just did it. Matter of fact, a couple of meetings ago where we told the state, Tennessee, that we have a textbook in the hand of every student. Now, is that, well, I'm sure that's accurate. It's supposed to be accurate. Are there situations where the textbooks are not used at all?
Yes, sir.
At say 7th grade English? Well, you pick it. I asked the question, you pick it.
I wouldn't think that we would have a core subject or something similar to that, but there are at points where some teachers, it would be appropriate for them to use other materials for that class because of that class's needs, or if you're asking if some students don't have a textbook that they take home, we buy CTE books, not one-to-one. So, because we couldn't afford during those textbooks to get some of those books on that regular basis.
Classroom reference.
Yeah,
Sets.
they're used as a reference set as well. Is that answering the question you're asking?
Yes.
Or missing it?
No, you're doing, as you always do, terrific. But I'm really not right now. I'm really not asking. I'm really asking about all subjects, and I have a reason. I have a reason for asking. I understand, and we had some people that were here the last time that were the questioning us quite closely on material that a teacher, individual teacher, can go. And gosh, I taught English for years, and I made up sentences and paragraphs. I mean, and used the textbook too. I just want to make sure that the textbook, I'll do better with this, the textbook is available for that student in an English class.
Yes, sir. There should be. Our coordinators order those, for example, based on the growth that we have every year. And we had about 884, was that the number, Mr. Odom, that we looked at today for the growth in high schools this year? So based on that, the growth in, say, Algebra 1 or English 1 or English 2, English 3, and they added additionals, or Mr. Sandvig will give him an order for those additional copies of what we have adopted in the past. We'll locate those copies through our textbook person over here that's on staff, and they'll order those for our new growth students. So it may be at the very beginning of the year, they may not have one because we would not have ordered that, or we may not have anticipated that number of students growing at that point. But at some point early first semester, we would have books for every student based on our procedures.
Okay. I don't doubt that that's accurate. But I'm going to say something that may...
I could take it.
Do what?
I can take
I know you. I know that. I hate to ask you anything. You know so much more than I do. I feel like sometimes maybe that the textbook is not always available as to a student in the classroom. And I'm not talking about something that they would share. I mean a book that they could take home and use. Do we send them to the school? Yeah. Gosh, they used to come into Laverne High School when I was down there by the ton and fill up the cafeteria.
Yes, sir.
I know, because I was in charge of distributing to where they're supposed to go. But anyway, the textbook is there. I want to make sure that they are used with other supplementary materials. Sure, workbook. I think a teacher ought to be very careful what they're pulling off the internet. Very careful. But English, I kind of picked English rather than maybe something else. I just want to make sure that they're being used.
They are purchased in schools based on their enrollment numbers. And each, like I said, Dr. Anthony, Ms. Powers, and Ms. Bogle, along with whoever is the textbook person, which you did at Laverne High School, they would send you a form with all books that were supposed to be provided for that school. You would mark the number of students because you would look at the number of freshmen transferring to become sophomores, and you'd say, well, I need this number of geometry teachers because my freshman class is larger than my sophomore class, and I expect to grow by 3%. So, Mr. Jordan, you would have taken that number and multiplied it times 1.03 and come up with a number and given that number to Dr. Anthony today, but not at that time, probably Dr. Washington.
Well, this is not a trick question. This is not a trap question at all, so please don't take it that way.
And that's the procedure.
Okay. I understand. You would be surprised, let's put it that way, if you discovered that some teacher out somewhere was not using the book, at least supplementary learning resource.
I would be surprised, certainly for English, with the math changing and our math being at the end.
Right.
This year, I would not be as surprised with math being more of a supplement to what we're doing because of the standards change. But we're adopting that book and going to have that for all of our students. There's sometime in our next semester.
I appreciate your answers. Thank you, Mr. Zago.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Also for parents, the online, every student receives a code. Part of the agreement when we adopt is that the textbook company provides it online. So if a student gets home, I forgot my textbook tonight. Well, sorry, son, just go on and...
We don't have a single text that's not online as well, to my knowledge. And I actually met with one of our textbook reps last Thursday, and I had discussed with her that we may have had something happen with some of our codes. And her statement to me was, just let me know how many more you need, because it's provided by individual student. And because they've become tighter with those over the last couple of years. We're supposed to be a one-to-one purchase of the book, but most of our textbook reps, along with Rutherford County's purchasing power, provide us a little leeway with that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I received an email today, since we're on this, from the U.S. Department of Education recommended that schools look at open source textbooking instead of a textbook. And I thought it was unusual that they sent that out. Well, I don't know the basis or why or whatever it is. You know, I think the future may be a little bit more of that, but that does frighten me in several ways too.
So open source.
I forwarded it to Mr. Zago, KMUS DOE.
But does open source mean internet?
Good, yes, sir. That's why I said I was surprised.
Does open source mean editable, and how open? I mean, are we talking about wiki textbooks?
No, I don't think so.
About a textbook that's open to the public without purchase.
Oh,
Open source is a sort that is where you do not have to purchase the book itself or the textbook.
Okay, but not open edited.
No, sir.
Okay,
okay.
They're talking open, available to the public at no cost.
okay.
There's some math now that comes out of Utah and places like that that's open source.
Ms. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with this open source, even if they're textbooks online, if I'm understanding that correctly, is pretty much what we're saying. Now, the ones that they were talking about in the letter from the DOE. How is that going to impact, or where is it going to be in the role of the textbook commission, and how textbooks are approved and
I don't know.
selected at the state level and at the LEA level?
That I do not know. I'm telling you, I received it today. It didn't come from the State Department or anything, so, you know, Tennessee law has the process in place
Right.
for the adoption, so I assume that if Rutherford County used an open source textbook for biology or something like that, that it would still require the process, but something's going on in the background. I just don't know what it is at this time, or who's maybe pushing that, or why.
If it was open source, we'd have to vet that through our committee process, which is state law, and we'd have to turn around and bring that to you guys for your vote up and down on whether we take our recommendation of that as our text to use in our classroom.
Thank you. Even at that, then it's still, even before it comes to you, has to be vetted at the state level. Okay.
Or it would have to go through the process of you know, where we don't have a textbook available, like some of our CTE classes.
I think the breakdown here, if there is one, we buy the textbooks, and we buy it in the appropriate number and probably exceed it. We send it to the school. Somebody at that school gets it to the proper classroom or classrooms, and we've got proof of all of that. But do we actually know that the student gets the book and is using it? Do we know that? Exactly.
I don't know if we would have enough staff or time to enter every classroom.
Yeah, I understand.
Verify that text was being used, even though it's sent that there. To answer it from our staff here, but it is expected to be used.
I can tell you what I would do as a parent. I'd make an appointment with the school. And if I was concerned that it was affecting my child's learning or grades, I'd want a face-to-face talk. That's what I'd recommend.
Well, I got, of course, we got a problem, and I'm not really going in that direction with the social studies book particularly. But if I went back into the classroom, which people shudder to think that might happen, and I were teaching, say, a second-year algebra with equations, and I had a textbook, I could at one time actually work those problems. I really could. I know y'all don't believe it, but it's true. But I would quickly run out of problems for these youngsters to work, particularly if they had trouble with them. So where would I go? I'd go to the internet, and I'd get more equations, and as many of them as I needed. And, I think this is a critical point right here. If I didn't know material really well enough to teach it, maybe, or I was unsure of what I needed to do or how to go about it, I might go to the internet and get some material that maybe was not totally appropriate for the proper grade level. Am I making sense there? I think we're, no, I'm not making sense.
So, he has a long statement about it, and I won't repeat that here, but, you know, you have to be very careful when you're starting to try to, prepare for every possible situation like that. We have principals, and we have great administrators throughout the school system, and that's the heart of along with our teachers, and they do an exceptional job of getting the best teachers in there. And we have to sometimes just have faith that our teachers do the right thing, you know, and do those things correctly.
Is the cost of the paper goods and that sort of thing, is it still about the same as the textbooks? I mean, the technology we...
That he had heard recently today that there's a huge push coming to make everything electronic
Right.
in the next 3, 4, 5 years. But I haven't seen that. Don't foresee that, but it's a big educational push is what Mr. Sandvik was sharing with me today.
Well, I watched my granddaughter work some math this past weekend in Spanish Fort, Alabama, that I couldn't work if I stayed there a year, okay? She's a senior. But I do happen to not talk to her about it, and she has one book, and it's not a math book. I don't remember what she told me it was. She told me, and she said it sure saved on the backpack space. But I assume that we've asked Mr. Sandvik this before in Health and Ed and other places about the cost of that, because we were looking for a place, and it's about the same.
Currently, the cost
Higher, maybe.
Hardware.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Currently, the cost of the text is basically the same, but then you have other costs that you have to add to.
Okay.
And that's what Mr. Evans said today about the open source. When I heard the two things together, that starts making my mind wonder.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Number 11.
Number 11 is a financial matter, and this is a budget amendment for classified staff. This amendment cleans up $36,905 in already budgeted pay for the classified hourly staff and related $5,635 in related benefits. The changes reflect the staff we now have in place and vacation payouts. Recommend approval. The motion to amend the 2015-16 general purpose school budget by $42,540 in classified staff and benefits as presented.
Questions? Number 12.
Number 12 starts our new and revised policies. The first policy is Policy 3.206, Community Use of School Facilities. The purpose of the revision is to add a provision prohibiting the use of school facilities for funeral, cremation, or burial purposes or services. Memorial services may be permitted for individuals who have particularly strong involvement with the school or the school system if approved in advance by the Director of Schools and so long as the deceased is not brought onto school property. The second policy is Policy 5.118, Background Investigation. The purpose of this adoption is to recommended by the Tennessee School Boards Association to be compliant with state and federal law requiring policies and/or procedures that address the use, dissemination, retention, security, storage, disposal, chain of custody, and misuse of criminal history background check records. Recommend approval. The motion will be to approve the revisions to Policy 3.206 and the adoption of Policy 5.118 on second and final reading as recommended by the Policy Committee.
We've had quite a bit of conversation about these through the committee process. 13.
13 is report on transportation for information. The Transportation Department has budgeted 6 buses for 2015-16. We have put on 5 buses through October. This brings us to a total fleet of 248 buses. We have exhausted the first priority list and currently are at number 4 out of 62 contractors on the second priority list. Buses are traveling a total of 18,844 miles per day, which equals to 339,192 miles per month, or 3,391,920 miles per school year. This year, we're utilizing the iNow student database, that's the student database we're talking about, to track students to ride the bus. This requires each school to identify those students, input their bus information. As of the end of September, we are showing 24,574 assigned to buses. There are 17,926 students assigned to buses that live 1.5 miles or further from school and are being transported each day. We have transported 152 Atlas students, academic time leads to achieving students, and Rutherford County Schools Assistance Program for families in transition through the end of October compared to 115 in 2014. We have had 8 accidents, 5 were less than $400 damage, with 0 injuries so far this year compared to 4 with 3 injuries in 2014. All buses are equipped with video surveillance, which is used by schools, the Transportation Department, and bus drivers to identify individuals and actions involving misconduct. We've pulled 198 videos from buses through October compared to 147 in 2014. Mr. Snell is here if you'd like a follow-up question or discussion.
Just because this is brought up this evening, video coverage, I know that one of our intents is to monitor the passenger area of the bus. Do we have a view on those videos of the driver?
Yeah, there's a video camera that is over the side of the bus driver, right over here where his area is, that looks down onto the bus driver and shoots down into the stairwell. So you can see the bus driver as well as anyone getting on the bus or getting off the bus.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Young?
I have another question, not really pertaining to this, but I did have a question today from a bus driver stating that we may be getting seat belts on our buses, which I think is probably a great safety thing to do. But the question
Well, that's this morning on the Today Show that talking about the federal government is considering the fact of requiring buses to have safety belts on them. So far, that's as far as I know.
If you saw the, I guess we saw the same thing this morning, I guess. If you saw that, you wonder why we don't already have them. I'm just wondering what it would cost.
Yeah, I don't know. And the question I got, would we require the bus drivers that already have buses under contract to go back and get retroed for the seat belts?
That discussion this morning that I saw from the federal person did not address that issue of that. So.
Was it 8,000 to 9,000?
Is made from the federal level, but the discussion that I saw this morning, I'm sure it's the same one you saw, was that their concern was that districts would not take on that cost and that responsibility unless it was mandated, so that there would probably be regulations coming that require
How much a bus? Did somebody just,
It seemed like I heard that, was it 8,000 to 9,000? Was that the figure I heard? Do you even know, James? I heard a figure, but I was,
The news story didn't include a figure. It would probably also, Mike can answer this better, but would depend on the age of the bus and things like that, because they have to be retrofitted and new seats have to be installed because of the way that, some structural support there. But the story that everyone's talking about was on the Today Show, and it's in today's media report. For the first time ever, one of the federal safety chiefs has recommended that this should happen, but like Angel said, it's only a recommendation at this point. There's nothing behind it. They speculated that it's probably coming, but at this point, it's voluntary for school districts, and we don't really know what it would cost or how they would phase it in.
There was a proposal several years ago. Mr. Hodge, do you remember how long? Because it came before the board because we discussed that expense because the General Assembly was considering that bill, but because of retrofitting, Mr. Evans said the support for the seats and the belts themselves, it was going to be an extensive cost at that time. Do you remember that? So I don't remember how expensive, but I think we were surprised at how much it was going to cost to redo all the buses.
well, that probably won't happen unless it's federal law. And I think Ms. McLeod is correct. I think that's probably going to happen. And that's, if my figures are right, that's $2 million. Close. I'm not saying anything, for it, against it, or anything else, but if you watch that video this morning, you would be convinced, I think, where you're going to get $2 million, I don't know, but, well, yeah, I do.
I'm sure it will be quite a bit of debate because of there's really two philosophies as far as seatbelts on buses. So we'll see. Anybody else?
So, Mr. Snell, we have about 55% so of our students that are assigned to a bus, 24,500 out of 42,000. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of 55, 58%, something like that. So people actually, they ride these buses, don't they?
Is that at a state level, or is that increasing or decreasing?
As far as
Number of kids?
as far as the state's concerned,
the percentage riders.
Percentage was?
about the same. It has stayed about the same. That, you're in the era when prices were a whole lot higher. There were maybe a few more riding the bus. And now that it's a little less, there are a few more being taken by a car or driving their own car. But not a very.
I'm sure we'll have further discussion on this issue. 14 we'll take care of Thursday night. 15, Mr. Odom.
15, I do have a handout in your, should have in your folder. A couple of you have given me questions as you're going into schools and talking to teachers and addressing faculties. They're asking you questions. So I want to take just a few minutes tonight to touch on it. I'm not going to read to you. You've got this as a reference. You can go back and take a look at it. But the questions that some of you have been giving me, and I'm sure it'll be some of the same ones that people that are listening on television or YouTube, whatever might do. So I'll cover them really quickly. Why are curriculum standards changing all the time? The process is a 6-year cycle we've talked about before. Different subjects each year of the 6-year cycle. They have moved up social studies for next year. Actually, science is a kind of a year behind. But typically, with the switch away from Tennessee's Common Core, they're coming back and reviewing them more quickly. But the answer is, should be the same for a 6-year cycle unless Tennessee changes the cycle. Why has Rutherford County adopted the professional learning community model? The PLC is simply because that across the country, it is the model that is shown to prove the greatest growth and improvement in schools. The PLC model is a collaborative model. It's the same thing that attorneys might do if they were collaborating on a case. Your doctors might do if they were collaborating on how best to treat a patient in the hospital or something. It took education a long time to get to the place that when we have a student that's not learning, let's put our heads together and talk about alternative ways to maybe reach this student, visual, auditory, whatever we might do. So that's the process. Another term that comes up, the essential learnings. And the question was, why don't we just pick the essential learnings here at the central office and send them out to everybody? If you're in Algebra 1, there's a set of essential learnings, usually 8 to 12 essential learnings. They are the building blocks that you need to have to go to Algebra 2. Or if you're in third grade math, they're the building blocks that you need to go to math in the fourth grade. The reason we don't pick it and do this, 2 or 3 reasons. One is teachers develop it. It helps them understand the standards. But the biggest thing is students in different schools have different essential needs. In some of the more higher poverty schools, the building blocks for them may look different than the building blocks at Central Magnet or McFadden or somewhere else. So teachers basically, they'll be very close. And that's kind of question 4 there too. The PLC meeting schedule, one of the things that we try to do for teachers, we ask principals, don't schedule PLC meetings after school, where I know teachers after school have children of their own. They have other things that they have to do. So they're required by state law to have planning periods during the day, so we've asked our administrators, and all are complying, that we build in professional learning community collaborative time during the school day so that teachers can meet. And principals have changed the schedules very often where they'll schedule where a majority or all of the teachers that were teaching English 1 could be together. Very large schools, there may be 2 PLCs for English 1 or something like that. So you facilitate that happening and schedule it during the school day. Why are we data tracking student performance? And that's based upon the PLC environment. There's 3 essential questions to a PLC. One, what do we want students to know? We want them to know those essential learnings because that's the building block to the next. And number 2, how will we know that when we have learned it? In other words, what does it look like when a kid has learned it? And that's typically a common formative assessment or something that you do. Should be short assessments to see, and that doesn't always have to be written. That could be sometimes observed by the teacher to mark, whereas the student in 3 is, what do you do about it for the student who hasn't learned it? What types of interventions need to be in place? What do we do for our students who have already learned it, maybe some of your brighter students, so that they can be enriched? And so those 3 questions are the things that build on it. I know a couple of you fellas that did go to PLC convention. Mr. Hodge went, and Mr. Blair went, and the comment I heard that when y'all came back from it, this kind of makes common sense. So, and it really does when you stop and think about it. Sometimes common sense is not common. So sometimes you have to we kind of lay the process out. So common formative assessments, that's what's been spoken of a lot in the central office or in the schools recently. CFAs is kind of the term they use. Formative means to inform. So I kind of underline the phrase here. They are formative, meaning they are given to inform the PLC and the teacher as to what instructional content and practice are needed to maintain this academic growth. In other words, they inform you for your next lesson. If everybody's mastered it, move on. If you've got a third that haven't, then you need to do some interventions for those that haven't. If that's that essential learning building block, you've got to do it. So that's what that means. The question is, how can we know what content is covered in the new 10-ready assessment? I did attach, the state's doing 2 or 3 things. The standards have been on there. If you'll look kind of at your back page, I said sample. The back page happened to be the 7th grade social studies blueprint. So this tells a teacher of 7th grade social studies what the content might be. Now remember, Tennessee's new 10-ready assessment is divided into two parts. One is 60% of the way through the school year. The other is 90% of the way through the school year. The 60% of the way through is the written one. It's the one where they go on the computer, they're given a question, they write about it. So we know that part one, the extended response, is worth 12 total points for the student will get one score at the end of the year. This part one that comes in February for most of our students will be 12 points total out of one of those particular topics. Part two is 48 points. That's more multiple choice. It can have multiple correct answers in the multiple choice. They'll have to manipulate. There are rulers, there are protractors, there are things they move around on the screen. That's why we had to have them practice using the platform so that they'd know how to do that. But that's worth 48 points. So translates into, for 7th grade social studies, 60 total points for the year. And it tells you in each category, what percent of the questions will be on that particular category. So that's kind of what teachers are using to decide, what's my emphasis, how much time do I spend on this topic versus another topic. So you kind of understand what I'm saying there, what teachers look at. And that's provided for them. They've never done this for an assessment before. I don't recall this extensive a blueprint as we're seeing for the 10-ready this time. So why switch to online testing and why so many platforms? Let me go back just a little bit because when we found out we'd be going to online testing, the worry for us and for teachers and everyone is, are kids really ready to do this online? And how do you get them ready for it? So Mr. Zago in the instruction department and software people, we did some talking with some vendors and all, and we received something that you see there underlined. It's called EdgeElastic. EdgeElastic is not costing Rutherford County anything. It's an online practice program. If a teacher wants to give it's not a 6 weeks test anymore, but wanted to give a chapter test or a weekly test, the teacher has the option to go in there and put their own questions in on EdgeElastic, and then the kids can practice that test if they want to, and it'll score it for them and that sort of thing. So it's a real free, nice thing for our teachers to use for practice. The other two things that we have there are called Micah and MIST. Micah and MIST are coming from Measurement Inc., the testing vendor. Micah is more of a practice site that the state came out with in their platform for students to practice, again, all of the things that go with an online assessment. MIST is the name of the platform that's the actual test. So we've got one EdgeElastic that Rutherford County is using for practice if the schools want to use it and choose to use it. And the other two are from the state provided through the testing company, Measurement Inc.
Mr. Odom?
Yes, sir.
I know MIST has, you've run through some trial runs, and it hasn't performed very well. The Micah for the practice, is it better?
They never tried with Micah as a practice. They never tried with Micah. They had the process to call Break MIST Day, and the purpose of that was to get hundreds of thousands of kids trying to hit the internet. It's like Black Friday, I guess, ordering, to see what happens when you do that. And Tennessee did break MIST that day. The Measurement Inc. people could not do it. But since then, they've added additional servers. They've done some things that they had to do. So hopefully, much of that's been corrected. But we did not see it with Micah because there was no push to get hundreds of thousand kids tested.
Has there been another trial run with MIST?
There was another practice for last month, and this month of November is the actual 60% test for any school system or school that's on a 4x4 schedule, because they're 60% of the way through. Our Holloway High School is actually taking it's not really midterm, it's 60% of the way through this month. And some other school systems that are on 4x4, like a Wilson County. I read something in the Tennessean today about No, it was, what was the high school? Columbia High School. They'd had a little bit of problem with it. But talked to Trey Duke this morning. They have a place where you can go online and complain or people, and he said usually if you have problems, it hits really, really quickly. And he had not seen since the 1st of November when it went live for actual testing, he was not seeing people complain. But I don't know what'll happen in February, but right now we're not seeing it. We think they may have made the adjustment, hopefully. So do you understand what I'm saying about the platforms? They're just what your kid signs on to take the test. The other thing that I want to say to you is we, from this central office, did not send out any benchmark assessments this year. So any tests the kids that are taking, the teachers at the school have created it, or it was the practice test from the state for people to practice on. But in the past, we have sent out some benchmark tests, maybe a midterm benchmark for algebra. We're not sending out any from the central office this year. We just felt there's enough testing. There's enough to practice on. Teachers have some tools to do it, so none of those are being sent out from the central office this year. So, there are not enough computer labs or teachers to allow students to practice. And of course, we added 4,463, 67 computer labs. We were up to try to meet the minimum requirement, which is that in any grade or subject, 1/2 of your students can be tested simultaneously. So in installing this number of computers, we got up to the minimum. Could we use more, or do there really need to be more? Probably. In that sense, we'll know more come February, but that's what we had to do, 1/2 of the students in a subject or grade simultaneously. Instructor time being lost as students practice online assessment. Yes. I'll answer that straight out. I think so. I do have a theory at this, though. I think as kids get more familiar with online assessments of practice, there'll not be the need to practice these tests. Year 1, the kids need to practice using this new platform and learning how to do the underliner, the mark through, the highlighting features, how to move my ruler around to measure a line, all of those things. I really do think, in addition to content testing for students, I think school systems that have students practice online will be in better shape. I want to remove the manipulative piece to find out what kids really know, and before it was paper and pencil. But we've got to practice them enough to where they get familiar to where it's a time test so that they can move on quickly through the test. Why is English language arts and mathematics taught for 90 minutes in the primary grades when 45 minutes might cover the lesson? And this comes from several different things. The National Mathematics Panel, National Reading Panel and all, this is a national thing. It's not Rutherford County or Tennessee. Recommend that for early literacy students in the primary grades and some of the middle school intermediate grades, 4th or so, that 90 minutes appears to be the optimal instructional time to concentrate on the literacy and the reading skills. Now, that doesn't mean you're sitting with a reading book doing that for 90 minutes. Some of that is vocabulary development. I mean, it's not one activity that way. But what they're saying to the primary teacher and that intermediate teacher especially is devote yourself to 90 minutes a day making sure kids can read, 90 minutes a day making sure that kids can do math skills, and many of the other things fall in place. This is a research-based number, basically from across the country that's gone on through many, many years of research. It's not a bad number at all. Why is RCS requiring school improvement plans? Okay, always in the past, what we've had them do for several years since I was in instruction and been director of schools, when a school received their state report card back, if you have an area that you were deficit in, we asked them for a school improvement plan. What was your area of need? What's your plan to address it? Usually those were 3, 4, 5 pages, something like that. If you had 3 areas or something, what's your plan to address it? And that's just good business, folks. If you find an area of need, you address it and come up with a plan to address it. What's it gonna cost you? Who's gonna be responsible for doing it? You know what an improvement plan looks like. But let me tell you how the game has changed. This year, for 15-16, all 10 Title I schools are having to submit theirs online. I was in a primary school today. She said their plan was 88 pages. I said, oh, my. You know, Rutherford County, we had to do one. We were required to submit ours online under what's called E-Plan. And so what that is, it's 60-something pages, but ours has to include from kindergarten up. So ours has to address so many areas. I could see where ours could lengthen out some. I really think if improvement plans get too long, people don't use them. People use short plans that you use for reference, and you do. So this principal that told me today, what she turned into the state was 88 pages, but she had copied down about a dozen to 14 pages that got down to the meat of it and what they needed to do. But I tell you this for this reason. The schools that are not submitting online this year will have to do it next year unless the state changes their plans. So all high schools, all 9 Title I, all of them next year is going to have to submit their E-Plan online. Not sure who at the state looks at it, but that's in the works. It's not Rutherford County's director or instruction department making this happen, okay? This is coming from the state. So some answers for your reference. Questions if you've got any.
Thing to keep.
Well, it's a lot of confusion with 10 Ready and what's going on. Just lots of confusion.
Mr. Holliday?
On number 3, and 4 for that matter, when we're talking about essential learning elements, I have heard from some schools and parents and just community interest that sometimes some of the best information is when that essential learning transfer goes from building to building, from 5th grade to 6th grade, from 8th grade to 9th grade. That's a place where the typical PLC model won't necessarily accommodate, but if there is extra effort by really the building administrators involved in handing those students from one facility to the next, and they take an extra interest to say, what do my 5th graders need to know to be successful over there at that 6th grade and beyond, and likewise 8th into 9th and et cetera, they find a much smoother transition. And sometimes elementaries split, and there's cross zoning and things of that nature. But if we expand on the successes that we've had with the PLC in the classroom, in the grade level, in the buildings, and we take it system-wide and really grab hold of it and say, in addition, we're going to make sure cross-platform from school to school that we can be successful. The next phase would be then for those high achievement circumstances, whether we're tracking to the IB program at Oakland or the mechatronics program, be it Siegel or Oakland, or the Central Magnet, what is that next thing? These are the things I need to check off so that I'm qualified and I'm ready to take that step. But I think those are things that we need to, it's the next step, the overachieving.
In the education world, we call that vertical planning. And, last week you approve as the school board, that kind of was PLC days each year. Why do you do that? And typically, what they'll do on those vertical days, principals even meet together in their PLC and talk about, we're going to send English teachers or somewhere to this or the other. So most of what you're talking about happens on those days where teachers have not a 45-minute planning period to meet at their PLC, but have the afternoon to meet together to do it. So there's actually more of that already going on than you think.
The next thing that I marked was that, just to highlight again, because there's so much community interest on item 7, the central office has not produced benchmark assessments to be given system-wide this year. I wanted to emphasize that again. When we get down to number 12 and the 90 minutes being appropriate for mathematics and English language arts, is it appropriate, from the board level, if we're charged to assist in inspiring and defending the work of our school system, that we could have a bit of a commitment campaign? Perhaps there are those in our system who are saying, do we really need, you said these are feedback questions that we're giving. Do we really need 90 minutes? I don't know if I'm totally bought into this. Sometimes we need to say, hey, everybody, let's buy into this, because there really is.
Ms. P to speak to this. Do you want to? The 90 minutes, the PLC time for instruction or anything like that? You deal with it some. And again, I challenge you, if you want to see it, Google 90-minute reading. You're going to get a list. It's a national thing. It's something that came out again, that national reading panel, national mathematics panel, that for those kids in the primary grades, that the building blocks are so essential that, not that we don't need to do science and not that we don't need to do social studies, but if the blocks are missing for the reading and for the math, all this other becomes problem and accumulates later on. And so we basically, our principals schedule it. We look at their schedule, they schedule it. They are not having trouble scheduling 90 minutes of a reading block in their building, because it includes more than, when you hear the word, you think of just picking up the book and reading for 90 minutes. Some of it is that, some of it's whole group instruction, some is small group instruction, some of it's vocabulary development. Some of it may be on the computer on one-to-one on a software program or whatever they're doing. We're just saying you block out 90 minutes to do reading. We also say do it in the morning for your reading and math, because they're fresh. That's when they do it. So, there are strategies that work. So why not use them? That's... The person that asked if you could do it in 45 minutes, why stop? What the conversation I would have with the teacher, well, are you doing one thing for 45 minutes? Is it time to take reading to a different level? Is there a time of silent reading for the students that needs to follow that? I think it's a person that's probably not understanding how to best plan for that 90-minute block.
Anybody else? 16, there's a, did you want to do that tonight, or did you want Thursday? We have several presentations Thursday night, so why don't we go ahead if it's okay with the board?
This is information that the Risk Management Department has provided us from open enrollment. Come on. Information provided by Risk Management for this year's 2016 open enrollment. And I'll just highlight the figures that Ms. Street has laid out for us. You can see the baseline. We had 4,892 eligible employees that were enrolled in 2015. 5,784 packets were mailed out, so that would be the total number of eligible employees in Rutherford County. 4,855 elected to enroll in medical benefits for 2016. 517 declined medical benefits, and Ms. Street lays out the different responses, such as coverage doesn't meet my needs, don't want to be insured, participating with partner, etc. I won't go into all those numbers, but 517 did decline. 412 did not complete the enrollment process. Now, I asked about that number, if there was a way to specify how that number broke down, and Ms. Street said, not really. Just based on the total figures, we know that 412 did not complete the process. Many of them could have intended to decline, just didn't log in to say, I'm not enrolling, I don't want to do that. I only personally have taken 3 calls from employees who missed the deadline, and they've been given some options on how they can move forward with enrolling at a later time. So again, I can't elaborate on that 412, but 188 employees did drop coverage completely, and 141 employees will start coverage, so they're new to the plan this year or in 2016. Below that, you can see the impact of the eligibility criteria for spouses. So in 2015, 2,562 spouses were enrolled, and for 2016, 1,374 spouses were enrolled. So there are 1,188 fewer spouses enrolled in 2016, and the asterisk indicates that the projected savings were achieved by going through this process that we impacted this year's enrollment. Enrollment changes for 2016, we had a decrease in employees participating in the deductible plan. We had a considerable increase of employees enrolling in the HRA plan and a slight increase in the copay plan. So the breakdown of total enrollment for 2016, the deductible plan, there are 26% enrolled, HRA 44%, and the copay 30% of our employees enrolled, and that's countywide, Rutherford County in general.
Questions?
I have a few questions, if I may.
Yes,
Couple.
ma'am.
First of all, I noticed, and you may have talked about this, but it says that the projected savings were achieved from that tough decision that we decided to make to exclude spouses who had their own group coverage. When you say they were achieved, I mean, do we know exact numbers at this point?
Not at this point, but we
Okay.
built based on, our consultants were very comfortable that at least 20% of spouses would come off the plan. This is more 46%.
Oh,
So
wow.
we,
So we
yeah,
exceeded
we more than
considerably.
exceeded that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sandvig. Ms. Barnes, the number of employees that didn't complete the process, and, I mean, I'm not questioning, I mean, I saw, we're privy to the emails that you send out and all the communications that go out, and you certainly went over and above and bent over backwards to make sure employees were given every opportunity to go through the process, but this is a really high number. Now,
Once again, we don't know that that number are people that were in the plan that failed to re-enroll. This number could indicate people that were not in the plan and just did not log in to decline.
okay,
Because what we asked employees to do, all employees were asked to either go in and enroll or decline, whether you had coverage or not. So we think this number is indicative of many employees who are not in the plan and just did not go in. and
didn't
say,
do their
I don't want
declination
it, I still
form
don't want it.
again. Okay.
Because
And I
I've
assume
only
we're
had-
covered on that legally from the communications that went out, that if they didn't sign the declination, we're still okay if someone comes back later and says, well, wait a minute, I don't remember getting the email, or, that kind of thing.
Correct. And again, I talk to Ms. Street about that quite often because that's why we send it so frequently and ask people to go in and decline. But she said the main thing was that the packet was mailed to their home, emails were sent out, we sent out the calls. So we made great efforts to make sure
Oh,
everybody
absolutely.
understood.
Okay. And just one other quick question on so if an employee didn't have coverage last year, in other words, they elected not to take it, they declined, and they're one of those of the numbers that didn't go through the process this year, I assume the declination stays, but what if they were, I guess I wasn't asking my question right, what if I had coverage last year? Let's say I had full family coverage, and I missed the enrollment. Do I have no coverage now, or do I have the same as I did last year? Because I know different companies, I think, have different practices with that.
You will have no coverage as of 1/1/2016.
No coverage. Okay. Thank you.
And another part of this, under the affordable, in the past, yes, we would have liked if everyone had replied. and gone through enrollment. But the Affordable Care Act pushes the envelope up, and, ideally, we would have everyone respond. But people who have opted out in the past, I'm just like, oh, I've never
Right.
done it before, I won't.
Yeah. Thank you.
And this information will be presented to the Insurance Committee next week, our meeting.
Anybody else? Okay. 17, Mr. Odom, I think you have something to,
I just had one thing. Last week you received a copy of, you get the employee newsletter that Mr. Evans sends out, and talked about the LEAD conference, and we really had a lot of people participate. He just printed the names, so I've given you tonight what the people did that's involved. It's, I don't know, 10 or 12 Rutherford County people participated in the LEAD conference. The Siegel Choir was one of the main performances. You heard it last year, TSBA, and so they did at LEAD again to do that. The state contacted us talking about this post-secondary conversion and contacted Mr. Zago and Ms. Pilgrim, how about a name? And they recommended Bill Spurlock with our Megatronics program, so he was included on that panel. They thought of RTI, and they really, if you look at the state's film they put out, our RTI program is one of the part of the videos in that they're using. So certainly contacted Trade Uke and others, but we just have a lot of people that participate. So that's just FYI for you, a little bit of bragging, I guess I should say. Okay.
it's always fun.
It is.
Anybody else? We got a busy week this week. We have a meeting,
We have a groundbreaking, right, on Thursday morning?
Thursday, 9 o'clock at John Coleman.
And when will Mr. Clardy have the bulldozers in place? When will dirt begin to fly?
There's already a bulldozer there.
Oh, the bulldozer is ready, huh? I'll certainly do that, yeah.
Would like to commend the board attorney, Mr. Jeff Reed, for working through the Corps of Engineers paperwork dealing with government bureaucracy. I can't think it's probably ever fun, but again, thank you. I'm sure you moved it along faster than anybody else could have, so we're grateful, especially the children there, to see that structure progress. So, but there is I was there last Thursday. All the talk around the school was the huge bulldozer that was out in front of the school. So it's progressive.
Is it safe to say that Ms. Haley's ready to tear that place up?
That would be very safe to say, yes, sir. Very safe to say. I think not only are the students and the parents excited, but so are the teachers and administrators.
How much have we been delayed? I know we've had, a few weeks here, but are we going to be, what do you think? Right.
We have a meeting tomorrow night for future construction, and then again Thursday night our regularly scheduled board meeting. So, anybody else? Okay. We will see you tomorrow evening. And adjourn.